Hello everyone, I'm here to make another video about real estate. And why am I doing a lot of real estate videos? Well, I gotta tell you this. One thing I really like about this pandemic is it's really shaking up the real estate market. And why am I concerned with real estate? Because this is a very large issue. It's probably one of the largest issue that our country and our world is facing. The fact of the matter is these higher housing costs are not good for our economy. All they are is just manipulated artificial scarcity that drives up home prices and causes a lot of us to pay the price. Whether the prices go up, where they belly up, or when they crash, we lose a lot of jobs and a lot of confidence in our economy. And as you know, one of the reasons that why we're seeing changes to the real estate market, first of all, the obvious thing is that we have a high amounts of joblessness. And of course, many of those jobs are not going to come back, because a store that opens is not going to hire the same amount of workers than they did before the pandemic started to increase. And so you're seeing unemployment benefits just skyrocket all over the world. Second of all, is that the lending standards has been going up, which we'll talk about later in this video. Another factor is confidence in the housing market has certainly come down, because people are very frightened about the state of the economy, or just even going out and taking a look at homes. And as a result, this can deliver a lot less demand for homes, believe it or not. Now, there are other factors that you also have to look into as well. Number one, we're going to likely see a lot of foreign buyers pull out of American and even as well as Canadian real estate. That can certainly put a lot more listings into play, especially in the places like New York City that got hit very hard. Another factor is that there's been a lot of foreclosures that have been taken out of the market in the last housing bust. So if we see a lot of banks release a lot of foreclosures into the market, therefore we see a lot of renters in those homes, we can see this housing market shake up as well. So let's start about taking a look at these articles. This is from CNBC. And again, I don't trust a lot of these news sources, but you cannot certainly deny about the fact that U.S. housing starts fall sharply in April. U.S. home building dropped to a 5-year low in April. You know what? I'm actually really glad, because this true housing recovery was so phony, was so artificial, and once again it was built on artificial scarcity. There was a lack of construction that actually took place based on demand available. And I can tell you, believe it or not, immigration was one part of the demand because it's population growth. And the fact of the matter is, it's not just the amount of homes were being built, the quality of the homes in terms of the architecture, the framing, the structural quality, which my most viewed video really talks about, has been pretty dismal compared to decades ago. And in addition to that, it is still being a huge part of this sprawled, car-dependent urban planning system that is delivering so much cost, inefficiency, and corruption to our daily lives. So, believe it or not, as a result, is that construction and spread out development is really being put into such gridlock. And that's really good news, because now we can sit down, lay back, and actually think twice, finally, about what we're doing. Housing starts tumbled 30% to a seasonal adjusted annual rate of 891,000 units a month, the lowest level since early 2015. Wow, huge drop. And they dropped about 30% over a year-to-year basis on April. Home building fell from all 4 regions in last month. U.S. home building dropped There's a lot of fears about the crisis would lead to a deep economic contraction since the Great Depression. Well, we heard that about the last economic downturn. And I guess we never really learned our lessons. That's really the sad, disgusting part about this. And by the way, outlets like these are largely responsible because they have not been informing the public well about what's going on. The sad truth about this, ladies and gentlemen, our politicians are not telling us about this phony, manipulated fractional reserve banking system that's being pumped up by low rates and lending standards. Our politicians are not telling us. And more importantly, why isn't networks like this talking about the need to breaking up the banks, auditing the Fed, and of course, holding these executives accountable and possibly putting them to trial just like we did in the savings and loan scandal? Whatever happened to law and order and accountability when it comes to large corporations? But that's okay, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody should be distracted by celebrity paparazzi and sporting entertainment. Wow. Or just be distracted by other wedge issues that people keep pumping up, like abortions, things like LGBT, all these other issues, which, yeah, I guess you can say are important, but they're being used to cover up these very important issues. Though many states considered home building essential when they enforced lockdown orders in mid-March to curb the spread of the disease, disruptions to building material supply chains largely weighed on activity. No surprise. As the country gradually reopens, there's indicators of the worst home building slump is likely over. A survey on Monday showed an increase in home builder confidence in May, with 21.4 million people having lost their jobs in March and April. However, the housing market could be subdued for even while mortgage rates remain near record lows. Well, that's what's the sad part pumping about this. And believe it or not, mortgage rates went up towards late 2018, and we saw home prices stop increasing. But what happened? Why did these mortgage rates plunge? It would have been great if interest rates continue to go up so we can have savings. And I think it is a short and medium term pain that our society really, really needs. Permits for home construction plunged about 21% to 1.07 million units in April. The housing market was back on the recovery path before the pandemic struck, hitting a soft patch that stayed in the first quarter of 2018 and lasted to the second quarter of 2019. It expanded for 3 straight quarters. However, they're expecting a sharp contraction in the second quarter. Economists expect the housing market downturn, together with a collapse in consumer spending, business investment, manufacture, result in a gross domestic product as much as 40% in the second quarter. Now, first of all, I think eventually mortgage rates would have to go up. Interest rates would have to go up. They can't stay like this forever. The deepest since the 1930s. The economy contracted about 5%. Now, again, there's a lot of things that they're not talking about, which we'll discuss later on. Single-family home building, which accounts the largest share of the housing market, believe it or not, it's still single-family, despite the fact that birth rates are coming down, despite the fact that these so-called theories or whatever that many people on the right are talking about, they want to stack us up in the Agenda 21, smart growth housing, they're still the largest share. They dropped 25.4% to 650,000 units. And then multifamily, they've dived even a greater percentage to 241,000. So there you have it, folks. Now, then again, you have a lot of these other pundits out there that are pumping these folks that are very overly optimistic. The housing market has bottomed. It's going to recover. Yeah, with all this joblessness. And then let's take a look right here. This is another article that's reporting kind of a contrary story. And again, I'm not so doom and gloom on the real estate market. You also have to keep in mind that in the last housing boom, in the 2000s, there were far more mortgages that were given than the housing pump up we had in the 2010s decade. So the downturn, I don't think we're going to see a lot of foreclosures like we did before. But then again, we have far more markets across the country that are in an overvalued situation, including here in Las Vegas. As the continued spread of the epidemic puts much of the economy in standstill, many are wondering how the economic slowdown will affect the real estate market. And they're going to online showing, they're likely to struggle. And there's a lot of housing price bubbles, no doubt about that. And let's talk about the cities that are more likely to be hit. So you have underwater mortgages, distressed sales, foreclosure filings, unemployment, and so forth. So let's go down the list. We have Akron, Ohio, certainly a Rust Belt city. We have right here Sacramento. Certainly, yeah, there's a lot of overvalued housing markets. Phoenix, their home prices went up very, very high. They didn't learn from their lesson. You have Pennsylvania, Daytona Beach, Jacksonville, San Diego. Yep, I know, JJ, if you're watching this, you should take a look at this. And the unemployment rate was still fairly low, although I don't trust it. Atlanta, I was there about exactly a year ago. Certainly, they do have a lot of overvalued areas, although not as bad, and their economy is quite diverse. And by the way, if Las Vegas never actually existed, I would have probably lived in Atlanta. That would have been my second choice. I know a lot of you may disagree. Philadelphia, Memphis. Memphis is kind of like really the less, I can say, attractive version of Nashville. I don't know about you. New Haven, Chicago, which I was there about 2 years ago, Providence, San Francisco, Denver, Bridgeport, Baton Rouge, Lakeland, Fresno, Detroit, New York. That's pretty much obvious because, believe it or not, now, they didn't have too much of a surge percentage-wise in housing prices. And you could see right here, they have a very high household income versus median home value. Now, of course, household income is kind of misleading because you have to look at wages because you can have many wage earners that live in one home. But you have a high risk of people that have been exposed. That's pretty obvious. Cleveland, Cape Coral, Riverside, the place where I was raised for about 13 years, the metro area. Orlando, because that's obvious with all the conventions. Miami, no doubt, a lot of tourism. Los Angeles, Anaheim, and that includes Orange County, where I used to live. Bakersfield, so that's last California city. New Orleans. And ladies and gentlemen, what do you think is the number one city? Let's just take a look. Las Vegas, no doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to be among the hardest hit again. And the worst part is we haven't even learned from the last crisis, which is the main reason why we're going to suffer. Now look at this. We saw a change in median home price so fast. This is a red flag. This shows you this shouldn't have been done again. 136%. Wow. Change in unemployment, very high, 4.2%. Remember, it used to be among the lowest about 20 years ago. What happened? To about 7%. Although I believe it's way higher now. 5 times the median income to home value. And again, you have to look at median wages. Because back then, you needed really one income to support a nuclear family. Now, the median wage in Las Vegas, again, is about $35,000, $40,000. The average home price is about $300,000, so you're looking at 7-8 multiple. And then percent of industries at risk. See, that's the red flag. 35%. Gaming and hospitality, taxi cabs, a lot of those industries. Restaurants, they can't work at home. But yet again, we don't have a high risk of COVID cases. It's going to get really scary out here. And I know a lot of you are advising me that I should consider moving out. And on this article, as you can see right here, banks are tightening the screw in the U.S. housing market. They're getting tighter. They're becoming stingy despite low interest rates, and there's going to be a liquidity crunch forcing banks to remain conservative. Now, by the way, if they raise their standards, like 20% down, 700 plus credit score, I can tell you this, it's going to drastically reduce housing demand. And if it does, you're going to start seeing prices plunge because people just cannot qualify. Demand will come down. And if prices come down, you're going to see a lot of negative equity. And guess what happens to negative equity? Lots and lots and lots of foreclosures. So it's likely that we're going to be among the hardest hit, especially the fact that we have lots and lots of joblessness. And I also think rents are going to come down. If you look at the YouTube channel, Bull, Boom, Bust, Repeat, they're starting to change their deals. They're not reducing the rent necessarily, but they're giving you 2 months free to lure you in. Haha. What does that tell you? So they're tightening their purse strings, and a novel pandemic putting millions out of a job and an unexpected surge in unemployment. So they're not trusting the people, and they're becoming stingy. Look at all that. 20% down, credit score of 700. Wells Fargo also raised their credit score, and they've stopped taking applications for new home equity lines of credit. Now, before that, they were able to make a 3.5% down payment. So remember those $500,000 homes I was talking about in that YouTube video, most viewed? So if you had like a 3.5% down payment, that means that you probably only needed like $17,000 down. That certainly isn't a lot of money, I can tell you that. And their minimum credit score was 580. But you can see it's going to have a significant impact, and it's plunged as much as 25%. So it's literally going to have a double whammy. And after spiking in March, the U.S. mortgage rates have plunged to record lows. Housing markets bull believe the low mortgage rates could spur buying activity, but tight lending standards may put the brake on home mortgages because it's not all just mortgage rates. There's a lot of other factors. And that's what a lot of aspects to these previous articles I've told you are not telling you. Banks do not have much leeway under the current scenario on their borrowers who have mortgages guaranteed by the government, who've started delaying repayments amid coronavirus. The problem is the lenders will have to keep paying their delayed payments to their bond holders, increasing the number of borrowers to opt out to forbearance plans, exacerbating the liquidity crunch. These challenges are forcing banks to raise their lending standards. Okay, which is probably the right move with record numbers of job losses in recent months. And 33.3 million, which I believe is the unemployment recently came out as much higher, could be 50 million, accounting for 20% of the workforce. Loose lending standards during uncertain times could spell bad news for the U.S. housing market, losing their jobs. I mean, I could see a lot of civil unrest because of this. And this is going to really hurt the inner cities really, really bad. Just wait until you see if the unemployment rates dry up and welfare benefits go away. All the subsidies are gone. Think about that, folks. It's just really, really depressing. Here's another article. Another real estate crash is coming. Like the subprime mortgage crisis a decade ago. And don't forget, commercial real estate has sparked major public intervention to stabilize the housing market. But the Fed isn't stepping in to bail out the real estate sector. And the big losers are set to be ordinary households. And by the way, this talk about freezing rent and everything, oh my gosh, which, I'll show you in this video right here. They're talking about the housing crisis already here. And by the way, this woman right here, I saw her in person. I think the video I showed you when I visited UNLV, she was in it. So it's interesting to see how they pop out anywhere. They're talking about freezing rents. Well, who's going to pay the property taxes and the maintenance? It's going to really start to have a ripple effect. And then, of course, these local governments need the tax revenue. Since the start of the crisis, the Federal Reserve has won admiration from many quarters on the pace and magnitude of its intervention to stabilize the financial markets. Certainly, the Fed has taken crucial steps to help the facilities created back in 2008, as well as developing new ones. In April 28, it expanded the municipal liquidity facility, agreeing to purchase large volumes of short-term debt issued by small counties and cities in the United States. But little attention has been paid, and after they have been purchasing corporate junk bonds, in the aspect of the Fed's actions, namely relative lack of intervention in the private label mortgage-backed bonds that come without U.S. government guarantees. Moreover, in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, no direct help has been announced in purchasing bonds issued by cash-strapped mortgage providers and services. Ooh. Wow. This is just really, really looking just dirty. I don't think I'm going to have time to go after this article, but you basically get the idea. Now, see, why the lack of such intervention? The answer, as we have suggested, is deeply political. The Fed is worried about maintaining its long-term independence from Congress and executive branch of government. Therefore, it has to engage in balancing act of not doing too little to support the real estate market, while avoiding the risk of being accused of going too far without congressional approval. Ay, ay, ay. But first thing is clear, there will have to be a crash in the real estate value in coming weeks and months, although it's hardly not easy to see how this will turn out. And look at this, believe it or not, all this declining tax revenue if the federal government does not bail out the states. Well, we have a lot of states that are very reckless, like California giving aid to illegal aliens, and not to mention with all these pension bombs that they have. Do you really think that they should bail them out? I think they can give some help, but there's gonna have to be a lot of strings attached, including here in Nevada too. Now, considering the fact that my previous video talked about how Trump is going after the election manipulation in our state. So that's one of the things you got to keep in mind. And many people argue the shutdown has gone so far that there's a lack of tourism tax revenue that they're going to probably use as an excuse to increase our taxes even more. And if they increase our taxes, it's going to really, really backfire. I don't know about you, but I don't know if people in this state want to pay high taxes to live in this desert. So one of the good things is I really think that it's going to really, really encourage a lot of people, especially in these state and local governments, to behave. And they don't have a printing press. They don't issue their own currency. Keep that in mind. Although I do think the federal government can be reckless too. The normal economy is not coming back. Well, that's pretty obvious. People have changed. The culture, the mindset, the lifestyle. There's a lack of confidence. And then keep this in mind, like I've showed you before, low birth rates is going to cost Social Security a lot of money. I don't know if it's going to be $3 trillion. That's going to certainly have an impact on economic growth. No question about it. Think about it. So, what exactly do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Where do you think this is really, really headed? This is looking really, really, really frightening. And by the way, speaking of low birth rates, this means in the long term, we're going to have far less housing demand along with these immigration levels. I don't know if millennials, we're going to talk about this in a future video, where whether they're going to have the confidence they can get, the financial resources to continue to pump up another real estate bubble. And in addition, they're not having enough children. So will they buy single family homes? And with the low birth rates, are we going to have enough housing demand for the next several decades? And keep in mind, baby boomers are going to sell a lot of their homes because they're going to be wanting to retire. They just want to live comfortably on their pensions and Social Security. I don't know if they're going to sit in their McMansions. Who knows? These McMansions may go abandoned. Many of the homes that I've protested against. They may turn into multifamily units. Maybe millennials don't want to live in these car-dependent landscapes. Think about that. And as a matter of fact, I don't mean to sound like a wacko, along with the immigrants, I think a lot of US-born millennials and baby boomers may want to leave the United States because they've got student loans and other places have the lower cost of living and not the stress. So you let me know what you think. All right, everybody. Thank you guys so much. If you like the content, please share and subscribe.